And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Monday, March 4th, 2024. And we start out this Monday afternoon with where the sea ice edge. It extends down into the central Bering Sea to between the southwest coast and St. Paul. The ice has tried to at least reestablish itself a bit, even though we've had fronts move in through the southwest and west coast, bringing with it some milder temperatures back up around and a few degrees above freezing here down along Bristol-Kuskokwim Bays. The more noteworthy thing will be the fact that as we go through this week, and especially by the weekend, we're going to have colder northeast winds, offshore flow, starting from up around the Chukchi Sea through the Seward Peninsula and passing through the Bering Strait and then coming down along the southwest coast and then turning more northwesterly across the Alaska Peninsula over the weekend. With this colder air, we do expect the ice to advance south and southwestward later this week and especially over the upcoming weekend. In the meantime, we have one weak low just east of Kodiak Island, another secondary low. This low coming up out of the North Pacific is a little more compact. These two will combine and make for more active weather taking shape over the Gulf as we go through midweek. This is also going to push in the next front here along the Panhandle, especially as we go through late Tuesday night into Wednesday and Thursday, accumulating snows returning to this region. Arctic air hugs along the Arctic coast, north slope into the Canadian Arctic coast. That is the air mass that's going to break free and ride down along the west coast as we go through starting Friday and especially over this upcoming weekend into early the following week. And by Tuesday afternoon, we have this kind of double barrel low thing going on from the western Gulf to just south there of the Gulf in the North Pacific, with this front approaching the Panhandle. Another low way out there toward the western Aleutians. And then come Wednesday, the system in the northern Gulf with the front pushing in along the Panhandle coast will be producing areas of accumulating snow in the Panhandle, northeastern Gulf Coast. This next low, a little more energetic. That is also going to be tracking eastward up into the Gulf. So the Gulf is going to be the hot spot, and as these low pressures sit and spin here, it's going to allow for northeast to north winds to draw down the colder air along the west coast. So temperatures are going to get ready for them to turn colder there. A week from now will be quite a bit colder. So looking at the inner channels of the Panhandle, southeast winds 10-15 knots, waves 2-3 feet. For the outer coast, winds are going to be southeast to east, 25 to 30 knots, strongest out there side of Yakutat Bay. Swells 9 to perhaps 10 feet. And then Wednesday, those winds pick up with that front right here along the outer Panhandle coast. For the inner channels, southeast winds 20 knots, Lynn Canal to 30 knots, Dixon Entrance. Waves 3-4 feet there, Lynn Canal, but as high as 10 feet, Dixon Entrance. We're looking for southeast to east winds 30 to 40 knots, strongest up here along the northeastern Gulf. Gales 35 to 40 knots with swells as high as 15, 16 feet. For the northwestern areas of the Gulf, we expect east winds 25 knots within Prince William Sound, 6-foot waves. 35 to 40 knot gales just outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance with swells 10, 11 feet. And north winds 35, get west of Anchor Point down through the lower Cook Inlet to the Kennedy Entrance. 35 knot northerly gales, waves building as high as 14 feet. And then Wednesday, winds do come down 10 knots out of the north within Prince William Sound, 2-foot waves. Outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, northeast to north winds 25 to 30 knots. And then as we drop down through lower Cook Inlet to Kennedy Entrance, west-northwest winds 25 to 30 knots with swells of 5 to 6 feet. And then just light and variable winds across the north end of Cook Inlet. Tuesday, winds around Kodiak Island, northeast gales to 35 knots, Shelikof Strait, north winds on the east side of Kodiak Island, kind of a mixed direction of winds here east of Chignik. Eventually, they turn back more to the west, 25 knots as you get out into the lower third of the peninsula. Swells 4 to 6 feet, North Pacific side, 4 to 7 feet, Bering side. And then on Wednesday, we expect west winds Across Kodiak Island, 15-20 knots, a little stronger there to the east, but then shifting back around to the east from the middle and lower portion of the peninsula. 15 to 25 knot winds out of the east there, either side of Cold Bay Faults Pass, with waves building down that way as high as 6-7 feet. Across the Aleutians for Tuesday, west winds, eastern Aleutians 20 to 25 knots, southeast middle Aleutians Atka to Adak, southeast winds 25 knots, turning back south-southeast 25 to 30 knots there west of Adak. And then for Wednesday, with the low pressure that's going to be situated there south of the eastern Aleutians, we expect southeast to east winds 30 to 35 knots on Alaska down through Nikolsky. And then on the backside of the low, winds turn more northerly around Atka to Adak, 35 knot gales with swells 14 to 16 feet. And then winds try to turn back more to the west-northwest once you get west of Adak, especially toward Kiska and Shemya. Along the southwest coast Tuesday, northeast winds 15 knots out of Bristol Bay, south winds 15 knots into Kuskokwim Bay, southeast winds lower Yukon Delta on up through Norton Sound 10 to 15 knots, and then southwest winds along the ice edge to 30 knots there at St. Matthew with swells up to 13 feet. For Wednesday, we're still seeing southwest winds 10 knots into Bristol Bay and into Kuskokwim Bay. Look for west-northwest winds along the lower Yukon Delta at 20 to 25 knots, though easterly flow to 15 knots out of Norton Sound, and still awaiting that push of colder air to the north. South of the Bering Strait Tuesday, look for southeast to east winds 15 knots, lower Chukchi Sea 5 to 15 knot southeast winds. Strongest winds Tuesday will be around Point Leda, Wainwright, 35 knot easterly gales. Arctic coast east winds to 25 knots with plenty of ice in place. And then Wednesday, look for east-northeast winds 15 to 20 knots along the Arctic coast, 30 knot easterly winds off of Wainwright. And then turning northerly through the lower Chukchi Sea, 15, picking up to 25 to 30 knot north winds through the Bering Strait onto the north side of St. Lawrence Island.